Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Oxhorn, and here I am today with a video on my favorite Goodneighbor mods. These are mods that alter the town of Goodneighbor to make it feel more like what Goodneighbor was supposed to be. Now there are a whole bunch of wonderful Goodneighbor player home mods out there. I've reviewed a bunch of them, but that's not the focus of this video. If you want to check out my favorite Goodneighbor player homes, you can watch that video by clicking here. Now, when I was looking for mods to include with this list, I really wanted mods that were not only lore-friendly, but were true to the idea of Goodneighbor. Goodneighbor is a refuge for everyone. They turn a blind eye to crime. There are lots of drifters and homeless in the slums, and that's one of the major things that I think makes Goodneighbor stand out. It's got a lot of slums, people who can't go to Diamond City, people who can't go anywhere else, they go to Goodneighbor. There are some really amazing Goodneighbor mods out there that I think are extremely technically talented, but I don't include in this video just because I think that they add too much to Goodneighbor or remove the unique feel to Goodneighbor. They make it feel like something else, not the way Goodneighbor was supposed to be. So without further ado, this is Oxhorn's Mod Muster. First on the list today is Better Goodneighbor by Mika999. Of all of the Goodneighbor revamp mods out there, this is by far my favorite. Mika999 felt like there just wasn't enough people in Goodneighbor. Even Diamond City, which has too few people in my opinion anyway, has way more people than in Goodneighbor. Goodneighbor just didn't feel like a refuge for drifters. There were a few walking around, but there weren't enough. Better Goodneighbor solves this by placing a whole bunch more drifters doing a bunch of really interesting things. It's hard to sum up everything that this mod does, so let's take a look at the highlights. Starting at the entrance, we find new signs hanging around, and of course they're made from ruined pre-war signs. These say, "Welcome to Goodneighbor." And the mod author added a new stage near the entrance. Here we find a synth, a captured, maybe possibly destroyed synth, up on display, and the locals have been throwing potatoes at it. "Beware the hidden enemy," says a nearby sign. Outside Daisy's shop, we find a table with a drifter relaxing, and another drifter repairing a motorcycle leaning against the wall. Down the alleyway towards Main Street, we find a big sign that points towards the marketplace, and a man in a derby hat, possibly playing a gambling game. He has default drifter dialogue, but he is standing next to 3 glasses and some bottle caps. I'm assuming that this is supposed to be one of those street side games where he'll say, hey, let's bet $5 that you can't find the cap underneath the cup or something like that. Quick way for a street side shyster to get some caps. Continuing down the alley towards Main Street, and wow, we see a whole lot. Holes blasted in walls, new vehicles lying around. Well, where do we start? Here we find some seating made from some really interesting Nuka-Cola themed tables. We find the remains of a Nuka-Cola shop. Maybe it was a small diner for purchasing beverages. And then we find a new hole blasted in the side of a wall. The mod author envisioned this as a bank. This broken down, blasted out bank has a vault. You can't interact with it. There are a bunch of open safes. And a pre-war bank security protectron who works as a vendor.
Let's see what you have.
Beginning requested task.
All he sells is pre-war money. And all he buys is pre-war money. This is a useful way to make more money off of the pre-war money that you find in the Commonwealth. Typically, you can sell pre-war money for 1 cap for every pre-war money, but this guy values each pre-war dollar at 19 caps. That may be a little economy breaking for you, it kinda is for me, but it's a cool little feature nonetheless. Right outside the bank, we find a police ATV wrecked, leaning against the 3rd rail. Some youngster has come by and put a bunch of graffiti all over it. No justice, no peace. And then he says naughty things about the police. Look, there are even flowers in the barrel of one of these guns. This is a chem merchant. We find a big 24/7 chem sign sticking out of the road next to it. And the man in goggles leaning against the ATV is a chem vendor.
Hi.
Hey man, you need some chems?
I've been laying off chems and booze lately.
Hey, it's cool. I'm always open, know what I mean? If you're in need of chems, you've come to the right place.
Inside the ATV, he's got all sorts of wonderful decorations, including a chemistry station. But the great centerpiece of this mod are the street vendors lining Main Street in Goodneighbor. Some of these work as actual vendors, some of them are just decorations. This guy here with the Jangles the Moon Monkey, he sells a bunch of junk and scrap items. The lady next to him sells a bunch of clothing and other outfits. Here's another junk vendor. Sells domestic goods like cleaners and coat hangers. This guy sells mechanic parts. And then here's a food vendor selling his vegetables. Next to him is another junk vendor selling personal effects. This guy with the magazines is just decoration. He doesn't sell anything, but it sure looks nice. And then the guy standing next to him, what's this? New Nuka jewelry, 22 caps. And this makes sense. If you count the cap necklaces, you see that they're made from fewer caps than this guy is trying to sell them for. So the man is making a small profit. This is just decoration. You can't actually buy the necklaces. Behind him is a street artist. He sits on a bed with a bunch of paint cans, and he paints murals on this brick wall. He also acts as a vendor. All he buys is paint. So if you ever find any paint cans in the wasteland, you can sell them to this guy, and he's very grateful.
You think that's enough paint to last you?
Thanks. This really means a lot to me.
Next to the necklace merchant is a man selling clean water, reading a newspaper. And then we find a sign laying out the street side marketplace rental agreements. Each of these vendors has to pay Goodneighbor for the privilege of setting up a shop. We can go up the corrugated metal to find a little stage. Here we see a ghoul in a cage. Feral poke. It's fun and almost safe. Just stab and make a wish. Only 2 caps per poke. What a thing! What an imagination to come up with something like that. Poke-a-ghoul. If you ever wanted to poke a ghoul, my goodness. Here we find a weapon and armor merchant peddling his wares. And thankfully it's nothing crazy. No legendary weapons. Just the typical amount of weaponry that you would normally find on a weapon merchant. Next to this guy is the meat merchant. Diamond City has a meat vendor. Goodneighbor should have one too. This guy's got all sorts of boxes and containers filled with bits of meat. It looks great. And then the mod author leaves pretty much everything else relatively untouched. It's a minimalist mod that just breathes new life into Goodneighbor, making it feel larger, giving it more vendors, on par with Diamond City, adding new drifters, so that it feels more alive, more vibrant. As far as I have been able to tell, many of the areas in the town related to quests are left alone, so that it's not going to interfere with your gaming. It should be safe to install, even on a fresh game, where you haven't done any Goodneighbor quests yet. Wonderfully done, thank you very much, Mika999. The next one is also from Mika999 called Better Third Rail. Mika was disappointed with the third rail. This is the town's only sleazy pub, and there were only just a few drifters walking around. Magnolia's audience just wasn't very large. With this mod installed, he adds a whole bunch more people. This feels like a bar. Now we've got people listening to the music and having conversations. This is where business is done and where relationships are made. It feels alive. Let's go through each of these new characters. We've got a Minuteman leaning against a wall. He's wearing a Minuteman hat and Preston's coat. At first it bothered me that he wears Preston's coat, but you can't actually buy this coat elsewhere in the game. So it's not just for Preston, so I'll give that one a pass. The table across from this guy, we've got 2 guys eating steak with a loaded .44 Magnum on the table. Oh, it's so well done. It's a table on top of a barrel. These guys are digging into their steaks. Man, they look like they're having a good time. Next to them are 2 nice people drinking vodka out of glasses. What kind of barbarians are these? Vodka out of water glasses? Next to them is a Far Harbor fisherman. He's got fish decorations on his table, and look, his fishing buddy, a teddy bear with a fishing pole. Isn't that cute? Next to him, this is my favorite one. We've got 2 junk guys working on a Protectron. One of them is wearing robot armor. The other guy is wearing one of those iBot helmets. Looks like they wanted to listen to music while doing their work. The mod author left all of the original drifters. These 2 guys are just from the base game. And then that other ghoul in the jumpsuit, yeah, she's there too. So he didn't delete them or anything. He just added more people. Looks like there's a guy and his gal. He's in a hazmat suit and she's wearing a gas mask. My hazmat suit in my game is malfunctioning, so this would have the helmet in your game. That's not part of the mod, so my apologies for not fixing this before I shot footage. You know, now that I think about it, this guy might make chems. He's got his chem cooker next to him. She's in a gas mask, he's in a hazmat suit, and they're relaxing after making a days full of chems. Leaning against a billiard table. The next guy, these look like office guys or professionals. Maybe they're mobsters, maybe they're gamblers. One guy's eating a steak, and then they're just enjoying their coffee and cigarettes while listening to the beautiful Magnolia. And then look at Charlie's bar. Man, now there's furniture, tat all over the place. He's got road signs behind the bar, even a big broken TV hanging from the wall. And the big set piece is this huge broken down train car right in the middle of the bar. But of course it would be here. This is on the tracks. Maybe when they were building the third rail, they just didn't want to bother scrapping this thing. Too complicated, too heavy. So instead, they turned on the lights to the car and they use it to shine light on Magnolia. I just think this is so well done. It really makes the pub feel like the cultural center of Goodneighbor. He was careful to leave all of the quest things alone. You go back to the VIP section, and MacReady's just hanging back there. He didn't alter anything in here, which I think it's a nice touch, making sure not to interfere with quests. And the rest of the third rail is left alone. There's nothing upstairs either, just this dining area, which is completely revamped. And he was careful to make sure that nothing got in the way of Magnolia so that Magnolia can finish her song and sit down in her designated seat. A wonderful job on this one. Thank you so much, Mika. Next up is Extra Fast Travel Goodneighbor and Diamond City Exterior by Mr. Dude 1234. So you know how when you fast travel to Goodneighbor, you appear inside the town. But what if you want to get to the Goodneighbor area, but you don't actually want to arrive inside the town? This mod adds 2 new map marker locations, one right outside Diamond City and one right outside Goodneighbor. So instead of fast traveling to the interior of Goodneighbor, you can fast travel to the Goodneighbor exterior map icon, and you'll appear just outside the doors to Goodneighbor. It's a small thing, but it's important for those of you running the game on older computers. One of the more frustrating things is having to load into downtown Boston. The load in Goodneighbor takes time enough itself, and then once you get to Goodneighbor, if you're wanting to go outside, you gotta go out the door and then load all of Boston. This mod allows you to go straight to Boston, so it saves you time when loading content from the game. I should note, however, that in order to get the Diamond City one to work, he had to move the big baseball statue outside of Diamond City. Apparently he could only place the fast travel marker right where that statue was, so we had to move the statue to make room. If that bothers you, then you may want to give this one a miss. But if all of those excess and unnecessary load times bothered you, it's a great one to have. Thanks, Mr. Dude. Next up is Goodneighbor Radio by Wind Whistle. Diamond City has a radio. The Institute has a radio. Why can't Goodneighbor have a radio? After all, Goodneighbor is the only town actually creating its own music. They have the lovely Magnolia writing and performing her own songs. This guy loved her music so much that he created Goodneighbor's own radio station that does nothing but play Magnolia's songs.
I see you looking round the corner.
And you can find it anywhere in the Commonwealth. Just open up your Pip-Boy, go to the radio section, and click on Goodneighbor Radio. It's a great touch. It does not interfere with Silver Shroud Radio or any of the others. It may interfere with other radio mods you might have installed, depending on the radio station frequency that those mods take up. This one uses frequency 87, so any radio mod that does not use frequency 87 is compatible with this one. So, if you're tired of Travis and you just want to listen to Magnolia's 5 songs over and over again, this mod is for you. Great job, Wind Whistle. Thank you so much. Next up is Goodneighbor Watch by Pleased to Meet You. This simple mod adds a bit of realism to the exterior of Goodneighbor. He places some of the neighborhood watch Goodneighbor guards outside of Goodneighbor, because of course there would be some there. He makes a great point on his mod description page. Goodneighbor's in a dangerous area. It's right next to raiders and super mutants and wild mongrels. You'd think they'd have some sort of protection outside the only entrance to the town. After all, Diamond City has Diamond City guards wandering all over the place. So he took it upon himself to add them to the exterior of Goodneighbor. He's got some sandbags out there and 5 or 6 of these guys walking around with their submachine guns, making sure to keep Goodneighbor safe. A lightweight mod that doesn't interfere with much at all, and it adds a little bit more immersion to Goodneighbor. Thank you very much. Pleased to meet you. Next up is Clean Goodneighbor by Michael and Bat 88. This mod cleans up all the junk from Goodneighbor, repairs the cement in the roads, removes all the potholes, and fixes all the brick. Now, you know me, I actually like a town that's got a wasteland feel, a town that looks like it's been weathered for over 200 years, a town that hasn't been repaired because there's no more infrastructure. But I know that there are many of you who don't want to live in a trash-strewn wasteland and like to clean things up. So for those of you, I'm including this mod. The mod author painstakingly went through every inch of Goodneighbor, fixing the walkways with lovely brick, repairing all the potholes in this street. This street is immaculate, and removing all the piles of junk from the corner. You still find the drifters lying about, but their junk is all gone, and he took the time to make sure that he did this to all of the alleyways. Now, no corner to Goodneighbor has any garbage. There are a few things I noticed. There used to be this steam or smoke or smog that was hugging the road of Goodneighbor's main street, and with this mod installed, I don't see it anymore. I actually really like that, so I miss it. And there also appears to be a few things that he missed. With the smog gun, we can see a few little glowing bits of mist kind of hovering in the ground. He might have forgotten to delete these. They may have been part of that original mist. And there were some grates on the ground that apparently led to a sewer, and there was some steam coming out of the sewer. He removed the grates, replacing it with brick, but he did not remove the steam. So in some places you'll see steam coming out of a solid brick floor. But those are just minor things, and if those kind of things don't bother you, and you were more bothered by the junk, then this is a great little mod for you. Thanks very much, Michael Bat. And finally, we've got Dr. Goodneighbor by Friendly Ann. Did you know that Goodneighbor doesn't have a doctor? Yeah, I never thought about it until I saw this mod. That's not right. Goodneighbor needs a doctor. You'd think if any settlement or town had a doctor, it would be the one that has a bunch of chems.
If you need fixing up, let's get a look at you.
What's new, Doc?
Nothing, sorry. Just trying to practice medicine.
Yeah. See what's wrong with me, Doctor.
What's feeling off today? What can you tell me?
Yeah, Goodneighbor does have Dr. Amari, but Dr. Amari just works with the railroad and the memory den. She doesn't offer her services as a doctor. So this mod author took it upon himself to create Dr. Goodneighbor, a ghoul leaning against the wall near the entrance. He is all the doctor you'll ever need. Now this mod does conflict a little bit with the first mod that I reviewed, Better Goodneighbor, because that stage with the synth on it kind of blocks Dr. Goodneighbor. He's leaning against the wall and we find him kind of clipping into the floor. So these two mods may not be compatible. After a while, I walked around and came back and he was standing on the stage, so he doesn't stay back there forever, but these two may not be very compatible. This is a great mod to have if you're on survival mode, and a trek to Diamond City to find the nearest doctor is really an arduous process. Now if you're questing in Goodneighbor and you'd rather stay here, you've got a doctor. Thanks, Friendly Ann. And there you go, ladies and gentlemen, those are my favorite Goodneighbor mods, made by very talented modders. They really make Goodneighbor feel like it's a bustling town with lots of unique people. But you know what? I didn't find exactly what I was looking for. If you check out my video on the best Diamond City mods, I installed one that added a whole bunch of new homes for residents of the town. I was looking for something like that here in Goodneighbor, but I couldn't find it. If Goodneighbor is the final refuge for all of life's rejects, the people who can't make it to Diamond City, who have no home, who are drifters, who are beggars, then I would expect this place to have way more people. I was looking for a mod that would open up the streets a little bit, maybe make them longer, or make some of the buildings taller, adding a bunch of rooms and bunks for drifters and settlers to hang out. Better Goodneighbor is wonderful. It adds a bunch of great street-side merchants, and I think that's great, but what I was really missing is just a more scuzzy, slummy feeling to Goodneighbor. I just want the dregs of society all over the place with their sleeping bags in the alleyway, more refuse, more cramped kind of claustrophobic housing. That's what I was looking for, and I couldn't find anything that quite did that for me. But Fallout 4 is still a young game, and modders are still producing stuff every single day, so who knows, maybe we'll see something like that pop up on the Nexus soon. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen, those are my favorite Goodneighbor mods, and I'd love to hear your opinions. Were there any mods that I missed that you feel should have been added here? Let me know in the comment section below. I read all of your comments, and I use them as inspiration for my future videos. I am almost done with my series on Goodneighbor, ladies and gentlemen. I publish a new video 6 days a week, so if you want to make sure that you don't miss my next one, be sure to subscribe and to click that notification bell button. And if you'd like some cool Oxhorn gear, I've got a t-shirt shop with images that Teespring and I have put together filled with Oxhorn and Fallout 4 imagery. You can check out a link to my shop in the description below. And if you'd like to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. Patreon subscribers gain access to a private channel on my Discord server, as well as a bunch of other cool Oxhorn perks. But more than anything, I'm just so glad that you're here watching this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow morning, bright and early, with a brand new video.